Protective Systems Policy.
Emily
POPS.
again. Catch Emily again.
I had not
Alright,
had
but
the
me have to do
chance
something.
to when the
Me have to
minister spoke to listen to his presentation, but I became alerted to some of the contents of it from news carried in mainstream media, and thereafter by a reaction from the Chief Justice, the Honorable Mr. Justice Brian Sykes, and other members of the judiciary, to include the President, Honorable Justice Brooks, and the Chief Parish Judge, when they held a briefing with the media, portions of which were played in media. And I heard the Chief Justice's reaction to this proposal by the minister. Now, when I heard the news items coming out of Parliament, I'd not listened to the full parliamentary session at the time.
Wow. Alright.
But the gist of the news items was that a number of judges would no longer have close protection officers coming from the Jamaica Constabulary Force assigned to them for their protection, but the minister communicated that he'd be seeking to engage private security guards. My antennae, even before I heard the Chief Justice's position, my antennae went up. For all different reasons, alarm bells were going off in my head. Cost was down on the list. I think more than anything else, what crossed my mind instantly was, why would this policy come? In fact, I didn't even understand it to be a policy at the time. I thought the minister was just speaking from the seat of his pants. And I was wondering, why would they do that when a lot of security guards may have matters before the court? Security companies may have matters before the court. And if you're providing some sort of security service for judge at any level, then in the minds of some people, the perception of bias, not actual bias, the perception of bias would be evident. Well, can't say perception of bias is evident. There would be a perception of bias. So that was the first thing that went off in my head. And then the other part of my head said, but police officers are charged quite often with murder, with rape, with all different kinds of crimes. And they too are tried by the same judges. And police, it may not be a police officer belonging to the Protective Services Division, but it's a police who's charged, and
still up on private property, so I don't know, but I listen to Emily said way, same way.
That rang in my head in relation to private security companies.
Yeah, she said
I
private
don't know that
security.
the public
Well,
has that same perception of bias, even though a large chunk of the police force, they now provide protective service for members of the judiciary. Okay, so since that argument sort of couldn't hold, then my mind went to the issue of the powers of a police that would not be available to any private security guard. The training of the police, which is also important at different points in time, and which they could call on in a matter of seconds as the situations demand. And then as well, there are some courtroom dynamics that would be at play, because I understand that close protection officer for judges at all levels, would sometimes, they have to be in very close proximity to the person for whom they're providing protection. Sometimes they may have to go inside a courtroom depending on how rowdy things are in there, and you do require special powers to be able to go in to take control and superintendence of a scene, and those powers wouldn't rest with any private security guard at all. And so I'm left in a bit of puzzlement as to how this thing is actually intending to work. I've gone back to listen to the presentation by the minister, and I shall play a couple extracts of that to hear a bit more of his thinking on the move to bring in force this policy, public officials, protective systems, POPs. Let's hear the minister explaining the size of the protective service, the close protection officer, now guarding public officials across Jamaica in comparison to any police division across Jamaica. Here's Dr. Forrest.
You never know?
For whatever reason, they
Yeah, man.
but he explained in the
No, man, come every day, man, come around.
that there are about 515 police who are now part
Every day
of
I
the
come around.
Protective Services Division, and it turns out to be the largest police division in Jamaica. So
probably
there's
like-
no police division that has more than that. And as such, it bothers the Commissioner of Police, it bothers him as a minister.
Yeah.
So he feels the need to regularize the service. He then
Only backyard board in there, man. Not for come fast enough, I bet you sure. You know, I'm come up with one stuff. Come fast, Maggie, come fast.
Public officials,
Open our van
by
fast.
virtue of the office they hold,
No, man, I mean, like that, so good.
they will automatically
I mean,
have
like that,
members
so good.
of the close protection
Fix up
officers
themselves.
guarding
Do
their
I?
person.
I have to sit down
And
flat.
these include the Governor
Fix up
General,
quick, man. Yeah, I have to sit down flat.
Deputy Prime Minister and their spouses, Deputy Prime Minister, Leader of the Opposition and their spouses, the Minister of National Security, Minister of Finance, Attorney General, Chief Justice, puisne judges, President of the Court of Appeal, the DPP, and a number of other individuals who, by virtue of their positions, they would automatically be mandated public officials to whom police as close protection officer will be assigned. It becomes problematic, however, for the other group, because in the other group you would have parish judges, for example, and I suppose you may have masters, and all of those who don't form a part of this other first group, the mandated public officials that I mentioned, who the intention is to have private security suitably trained and which are to be accorded positions as special district constables when on duty to provide protective services for that category of individuals. But even so, I have a difficulty with that proposal. I understand what the minister is trying to do. And it can give very few of us comfort in the fact that the protective services division is the largest in the country, in a country that is most murderous than perhaps anywhere else there is in the world. But at the same time, I do not know that the proposal for the fix is a proposal that is the best. Why isn't it the case that there's a thinking to train some individuals as part of the Jamaica Constabulary Force, enlist them as police, but train them for these special close protection services division, and make sure that they have full powers of a constable, as opposed to merely according
Go, brother.
You get it?
Yeah, what? In the van? Can't train in
In the pan training where up castle.
these
Well,
special
yes, I
roles
know.
as
Okay,
district
okay.
constables when they're on duty.
I'll be finding going there.
You don't know
Yeah.
the training that the private security guards will come
Because
with.
in the last month,
But then you
2015
say the
going.
commission and
Nice
so
one.
forth, the JCF would then need to take these individuals and train them. At what cost? Who is going to do this training? Because what you're doing is building up a group of individuals whose permanent continuation with their private security company you cannot guarantee, because you're not their employer. So you may be ending up taking on the value of the expense of training them to providing the service, but it may very well be that the way they are treated by their immediate boss, which would be the private security owner, it is so bad that the turnover rate is extremely high in that company, and then you end up exposing the individuals who don't form part of the mandated public officials group and who would be guarded by these private security interests who are trained. You have a high turnover, which can lead to insecurity of those individuals.
Go over.
The last thing you want is people who run in, run out, knowing where judges live. Even if it's judges at the parish court level, most of the matters in the court are tried. Most criminal matters are tried firstly at the parish court level. Yeah.
No want to choke rub him up.
And then there's the issue of the cost of
Then
it.
I can go up now.
No matter how you rationalize it, I do not see where we can engage any private security suitably trained
Can go on up now a little bit, man.
and to deploy them as part of our close protection services without making the cost higher than what it is now that we are paying even for the very large 515 group of the protective services division. So I needed some better explanation, Dr. Chan, as to why it wasn't considered that we could continue to enlist people in the JCF, but we don't train them as rigorous as we would for frontline duties, but we train them so that they can be suitably ready to provide close protection service. And you keep it at the number based on the size of the public service that would now need that protection. Yeah? And frankly, if I were one of those public officials, I would not be wanting somebody who is so heavily rotated, who doesn't understand my synergy. I don't understand when the man moves, what is it that he's communicating to me? Because sometimes in a moment you don't have time to talk. It's only because of knowledge of the person over time you're able to read them and know it's time for duck because he's made a particular motion.
That's true.
So it needs further explanation, and on top of that, I've been made to understand through a question posed to the Chief Justice that there was no consultation. A move that is so big and that probably has at its core good intention, as I heard Peter Bunting struggling to disagree with the proposal a couple of days ago, because he said it's something that came to his desk. Commissioners over have said it's a drain on the resources of the sort of the crime fighting efforts of the country. But even he couldn't bring himself to bringing it up to the public because it would be a point of great disagreement. But knowing that, I don't understand there was any consultation with the people who would be most impacted by this move. So at its core, unless I get more, I don't agree with this policy at all. I think the minister needs to concentrate. Cabinet should revisit this policy and see if a plan can be hatched, as I propose, to train people to be police with the particular focus on providing close protection service. So you never ever expect them to be frontline. They are career close protection officers. And then we assign them to the individuals who are not part of the mandated public officials group. Now, there was a beautiful session, a beautiful oversight committee session for the Integrity Commission in the Parliament yesterday. To be honest with you, I've never seen Ed Bartlett chairing any of the committees of Parliament. And I'm going to say this, and I mean it in the best way possible. I didn't realize that Ed Bartlett was such a bright man. Ed Bartlett is very sharp. His superintendence at that Integrity Commission yesterday was absolutely splendid. And I can say this because I have had reason on this program to criticize that committee because the head had no clue what it was doing. At the time, the head was Carl Samuda. And they had the first session, and for 45 minutes, nobody knew what they were meeting to do. But yesterday, I'm telling you, you've got to watch it. The man had such a control over the meeting. Didn't allow the meeting to drift into nothingness because people came and, just wanted to go off on a fly. He knew the time schedule and he kept it moving. Really brilliant, Ed Bartlett. But on top of that, a lot of things came out of the session. So the executive director at the Integrity Commission, Mr. Greg Christie, and a number of the commissioners attended before the Integrity Commission, which continues to review the reports coming from the Integrity Commission. And I watch it, I mean, these things are so important. This country is made or unmade in the lower and upper houses of Parliament. Now, as you know, there's a law which sets out the constitution of the commission, the various departments, various divisions, and so forth, and it sets out how the commission is to operate. One of the provisions in the law is that there should be no disclosure of the investigations being undertaken by Integrity Commission unless and until a report is tabled in the Parliament. I am on record on this program as saying I am in full support for that provision remaining. Yesterday, the Integrity Commission brought before the committee, the Oversight Committee, for its consideration and reconsideration with a view to amending the law, asking for the Integrity Commission to be allowed to indicate that it has commenced investigation into ABC or D. Let me tell you something. The Attorney General was splendid in that entire session by bringing members up to speed, not only with what obtains in the Constitution, such that we need to ensure that the legislation does not infringe portions of the Constitution in relation to powers of the Director of Public Prosecution versus the Director of Corruption Prevention and so forth. Other members on the committee were clicking, firing and asking of the executive director, what is it, Delroy Chuck? What is it that you desire that you cannot now do? Why you're asking for consideration of lifting of the legislative gag that is on the commission? Yeah? And the Gleaner carries a story this morning. Gag grief for Greg. Confidentiality clause blame for undermining public confidence. Because one of the things that Mr. Christie said is when people don't hear from the Integrity Commission that they have launched a probe into A, B, C, or D, then they walk away with the view that the Integrity Commission members are living high on the hog and not doing anything. Can I tell you? I absolutely prefer the people to be of that view.
What?
There's no good reason for there to be any announcement at all that the Independent Commission has commenced an investigation. In fact, just as now, there is no good reason for there to be a lead news item to say that Indicom is investigating the shooting of a man by the police anymore, or investigating the murder of a man by the police anymore, because based on the legislative framework of Indicom, once there is any standoff between police and a citizen, between any member of the security forces and a citizen, Indicom is duty bound to investigate. It's the same with the independent commissioner. The independent commission, anything in media, any call made to the office of the independent commissioner, any letter written can trigger an investigation. And for too long, we have had in this country where investigations are announced, they take years to be complete, and there's a cloud that hangs over the person who is the subject of the investigation, and sometimes they never ever escape the cloud. And sometimes when the report comes, the report is empty on what it is the person is alleged to have done. So there are good reasons. I would suggest to the Independent Commission, what you need to do is to let your report speak for itself. Allow the people who now say they are not hearing anything from you to hear you speak through your final reports. In fact, I was trying to remember last night, since the establishment of the Independent Commission, even though they've been setting up office, and I know it takes a lot, yeah? The statute, the entity when set up, all they had was the law. There was no real infrastructure. They're literally building it from the ground up and working as they go along. But I don't remember, since it has been in operation, that any of its reports, or many of them, have yet been published. So you've got to let the report speak for itself. I am asking the members of the parliamentary group who are now part of this oversight committee, do not take any recommendation to change the law as is. The law is in its infancy, and there are good reasons why a law that is so new, the parliamentarians decided not to give the Independent Commission permission through the statute to communicate to the people who they're investigating. There are good reasons for that, and the reasons remain. People's reputations are tarnished by these things, especially in a social media world, where the moment you say you're being investigated, people screenshot it, it's gone all over, and people never recover. Let the investigations speak for themselves. Let them speed up the investigations and publish it. After tabling it in the parliament, and then people can run with it. We've had a history of people giving reports of investigations being done. They take too long. Some people die of broken heart. And I don't think it undermines the perception of corruption at all. Because if all we are wanting our corruption index to flick over from is an announcement that we're making some probe into X person or Y person, what good is that? So I beg you not to leave it.
come like.
I have just seen coming out of the UK dreadful news that a Tory MP, Sir David Ames, dies after stabbing. He's a Conservative MP. He was stabbed at his constituency surgery in Essex. We'll follow that, and you see the view I just expressed in relation to a close protection officer. This is how we have to relate this to this thing. This is in the UK. But this person in Jamaica could possibly be considered a public official deserving of close protection security. And we have to now ask ourselves, if that were the case in Jamaica, would this individual have the protection of somebody in a time like this? We have to take sleep and mark death. Yeah? The threat level against public officials may have been low, but this is Jamaica. Things can change in a flash. We have an instance where some time ago a resident magistrate was waylaid, yeah, and killed. Long time ago. We've not had it. Thank God in recent times, as I now recall. We have to watch it. I've always been concerned about the judges in particular, especially since we've stopped wearing the wig. Some people complain about the wig because all they see is this relic of colonialism, but you know, I see a lot more. I see a wig that gives the judges a cover, a disguise. You know, when they're wigless, every feature, everything on all the facial features are observable. They're trying massive gang trials, and man sit down in there, look on judge, just scope them face. Yeah? Judge goes out and goes to supermarket. He's known, she's known. The cover is completely lifted. So we have to bear those things in mind when we seek to think that there are a number of things we have taken away that have exposed some crucial people who work in different areas of the public service in this country. And while something has not happened in recent vintage, it is not that there's no possibility that it won't happen here. We have to make sure we don't say if we did know.
That's true.
I'll keep following what has happened in the UK with this dreadful story coming with the stabbing of this Conservative MP. Stay with us, those are my thoughts.